You are listening the voice of Ratan Kumar Chandra with my own works on divine science. My prayer. O God, let there be my attention to your devotion through which I get the power of creation to serve your kingdom in hope of my connection with you by your knowledge of salvation with your beauty of generation which I collect in my creation where my devotion is the only oblation to offer at you for obligation. I present you the playlet from a divine presentation. The name of the playlet is Rebirth of Earth. Playlet number 10. I tell you the dialogue of all characters of this playlet one by one. Forward. Light is the life of our lives. Light is the right of our lives. The right without which we can't be free from the fight of our lives on earth. So let it be the aim in the game of our lives so that we can be free from the same of our lives before the end of our lives on earth, when God is serious to his devotee, who is serious to God, to whom the divine owner in the sky of the world for the opportunity of the labor of the divine server to those who are in fond of being free from the rebirth of their lives in the world. Now playlet starts. Rebirth of Earth. Sky. Every dawn has its own morn in lives, which gives the best of its own for the rest of our lives. So when the dawn is divine, it creates a divine environment in our lives to adorn our civilization on earth by the ornaments of the sun, moon and stars in the sky. When God opens the divine door for the soul of our lives, our foresightedness draws our attention for the function of God in our lives on earth. Air. We know that a candle is lit by a burning candle alone, which delights its best to its surroundings, to create a relation of our lives for our own paradise in the sky. When there is the contribution for the condition of our lives, condition develops consideration for the recognition of our lives. When God adorns us by the divine presentation with a meeting of divine greeting, which creates an atmosphere of delighting our lives when we be free from the cowardice of our lives, because God has made us physically fit for earth, but these are our virtues which enrich us devotionally by our taste and smell in lives, to perfume the abode of our paradise for the surprise of God in our lives. Darling, when we think about God, we image the greatest one as the Sun, who is the only source of the existence, resistance, and deliverance of our lives, for its energy, light, and motion in our lives, which is the source of our emotion in lives. Emotion is the source of our creation, and creation is the source of our generation, progression, and above all, the salvation of our lives on earth. Air, my friend, as the sun rotates itself in its own place, so there is a rotational gravitation around it which attracts earth to rotate around the sun. But as the shape of the sun is circular, but the shape of the earth is not circular, which is except having own poles in it, and these poles are called as dipoles of earth, as the positive and negative poles of earth. And as the sun rotates itself in its own place, so these poles are being attracted and rotated consequently around itself by the sun, so that earth can rotate itself in its own place, to rotate around the sun in rotating position, due to which there is day and night on earth whole round the year. And by counting of this day and night, we have come to know that earth takes 365 days to take a round of the sun. But it is not possible to count the rotation of the sun due to the high light in and around the sun, and due to the big figure of the sun, which is near about 30 times bigger than earth, having a distance of 150 millions of kilometers from earth. Sky, darling, as the sun rotates itself in its own place, so due to the gravitational power of its own, it throws, attracts, and rotates its energy, motion, and light around us on earth, because only a rotating object can rotate and attract another one around itself. Air, my friend, as the diversity of our physics are derived from the diversity of the shape of earth, sources of earth, and the movement of earth, whereas earth is except, so the shape of the area of the atmospheric pressure is also except on earth, as our earth is being attracted and rotated by the sun, and as we are in the except area of the atmospheric pressure on earth. Due to which the growth of our lives are also being accepted on earth. And as we move in circular way, so we grow gradually to lose gradually on earth, where our existence and resistance take place till the end of our race for the deliverance of our lives on earth, so that there can be the opportunity of being free from the rivers of our lives on earth. So the breaths of our lives weave the cages of the ages by the pages of our lives, which binds the minds of our lives by the unknown boundness to be unknown divinely in the race of the diversity of our lives on earth. When the diversity of God sows the cues of the physicus of our lives in place of the deliverance of our lives, when it creates a loneliness of its own, being free from the known physicu of our lives, while in along with our song, O God, I am mine, make me thine, so that I can be signed by you in your sky. God, but no more. No more time is there for my share with you. As I am none here, I have given my right to sign you on earth, but you are not showing any interest for my divine best on earth, where the divine owner is there to take the divine care of your lives, because the ration and fashion of your lives have an end on earth. So there is only way of salvation by the divine promotion of your lives in the sky, for which I have made a divine owner for the care of those who take my care and the care of my divine owner on earth. Air. Really, this is a very important period of our lives in the world, as there is the presence of the divine owner on earth, and after passing this period there will be none here, neither God nor the divine owner will be there for your prayer on earth, when earth will not be able to feed you, and you will lose yourselves to lead you on earth without any identity of your personality in life, when the weight of your character when the weight of your character will lose yourself with the losing of the weight of the sources of earth, which displaces the earth from the moderate atmospheric position of our civilization gradually from the sun. That's why God has handed over His charge to His devotee on earth, so that we can discover God from the ignorances of ages, to be free from the cages of our lives, as the surprise of the mercy of God for the paradise of our lives on earth. God. So now I am free from my charges, as I have given birth to the divine owner on earth, indicating that as you sow, so you reap, by relation to your civilization for the arrangement of deliverance by the judgment of my divine management on earth, which discloses the secrecies of the diversity of divine creation on earth for a chance of the salvation of your lives before the ruination of your civilization on earth. Air. O God, let your love be our asset to set our lives in heaven instead of the pain of losing you in our lives on earth. My friends, our lives are the game of motion on earth, where the motion is the source of our creation by the grace of the energy of our Father the Son, which is based on the relation of the divine bodies on earth. So our divine science is the science, the mechanism and function and the transaction of the sun and earth with our lives are the sources of the existence, resistance and the deliverance of our lives on earth. So the incident of deliverance is a divine festival in honor of the coronation of the divine honor on earth by God, when the manner of the divine honor is displayed through the divine honor by the surprise of the gateway of divine paradise for our lives in the sky, a most sensitive and responsible divine chapter for the study of those who are made for the honor of the divine honor, in fond of being the divine gainer in lives, a wonderful display of the divine mercy and courtesy for the divine democracy of our paradise in the sky. Through the divine honor on earth, when the divine bodies as sun, moon and stars are within reach of our lives on earth, through the divine honor for our divine coverage in lives. So if we don't try to be free from the edges of the cages of the atmospheric pressure on earth, if we don't try to be free from the Jew of creatures on earth, the time will come when our earth will be unable to feed us, and due to the lack of the sources of our lives on earth, we will lose ourselves and our civilization gradually on earth. So let there be the role of the divine goal of our lives on earth, which is beyond from all tricks of alluring God for deliverance in lives. This is a festival of deliverance by God in the world in return of our festival of God in lives. So in this festival of God, the deliverance of our lives are derived from the divine honor in the world, and the divine honor in the world is derived from God in the sky. Sky. Darling, we are human beings. We have a sense of God in our lives so that we can get the chances of deliverance in our lives on earth, which can make us free from the rivers of our lives on earth, for which God has sent His saints time to time in the story of our civilization on earth, who has enriched us by the lesson of our salvation in lives, which are based on the basis of the relation of virtues for humanity, informed of the sense of deliverance for divinity in our lives on earth. So it depends on the virtues of our lives that how and which virtues we should serve in our lives, which can lead us to the altar of God in our lives, so that our lives can be enlightened by the light of God, and we can enlighten the limelight of our civilization on earth. So as the divine owner in our lives, I advise you to disclose the secrecy of the mercy and mercy for truth in our lives, which can draw the attention of God to disclose the divine secrecy of the mercy and mercy of God for the truth of our lives on earth. Though it is tough living in this rough situation of our lives, but definitely the enough efforts for our firm determination to our willpower in lives can help us for our salvation in lives. Here, actually, our existence and resistance are not enough in itself. We need deliverance for the complete sense of our paradise on earth. That's why our divine bodies are not only the pictures in the sky, they are the suppliers of the raw materials of our lives on earth. They are the creators of the creatures on earth. Their judgment is the arrangement of their judgment is the source of management for the arrangement of deliverance by the divine owner in our lives on earth. My friends, as earth is being attracted by the sun, so and we are on earth, so we are also being attracted by the sun, due to which we grow upwards towards the sun on earth. Every seed grows upwards towards the sun, but due to the figure of earth, movement of earth, as the earth is accepted and moves in a circular way, so with the sources of earth we grow ourselves gradually, to lose ourselves gradually till the end of our lives and the end of our civilization on earth, with the end of the sources for our lives on earth. Sky, darling, when the hope of love runs behind the hope of life, spreading the winds of the faith and favor for the divine shiver in our lives, the enchanting power of which draws us for the surprise of our lives as the price of liberty for our loyalty to the pivotal dream of our paradise in lives, for which we have enkindled the candle of our eyes, where the tears of fear searches you, where the tears of fears searches you to make you my dear by the offerings of our sufferings to you, when as our dear one you hear us for a rare chance of our salvation in lives towards the dawn of the immortality of divine dignity from the mortality of our lives on earth. Here, my friend, as love develops emotion in our lives, emotion develops relation of our lives. Relation develops the net of our lives, which sets us for our surprise in lives, the prize of which praise us for our performance in lives, which varies from the earth to the heaven, given by those who knows the future of the secrecy of the diversity of our activities on earth and in the sky. where the performance of our lives or the succession of the progression of our generation on earth as a lesson for the perception of our mission in lives, which can be the source of our salvation in lives, because the diversity of our mission in lives are derived from the motion of our lives. So gradually, as the motion of our lives matures with the maturity of earth gradually for our lives, that's why when our lives are derived from the sun in the sky, our foresightedness should not be limited within our birth and death on earth. Our foresightedness should be derived from the light of the sun in the sky also, so that we can be free from the cruel and selfish mentality of our lives on earth for our divine birth in the sky, as well as we can be free from the rebirth of our lives on earth, being in hope of the favor of God, so that we can reach at the altar of God in the sky, when there will be the period of sinking in the sea of earth. The efforts of our linking with God in the sky can be fruitful for us in our lives, so that we can save ourselves from the awfulness of the diversity of creatures on earth. Sky, darling, as the function of the mechanism of divine science regulates our lives, so this is a task of our lives, this is a test of our lives, so that we can be the best for the surprise of God in our lives. As 3 parts of earth is full of water out of 4 approximately, so evaporization is there by the heat of the sun on the water surface of earth, which is the source of the rotating vapor on the rotating surface of earth, as the source of the vibrating atmospheric pressure of our lives on earth, and the suitableness of the atmospheric pressure on earth is the source of our existence and resistance on earth, which can lead us to our deliverance in lives, when the diversity of the vibrating atmospheric pressure adorns our lives by the test and best of its own, so that we can be known divinely in our lives on earth. And as we are derived from the function of the rotation of earth around the sun, so when the earth is in closest position of the sun, the vaporization of water is maximum on earth. So the weight of earth is maximum, as well as the heat is also maximum there, which develops cloud to beat down the heat by the rain, when the earth gets fresh energy for its breath, while creating the distance of earth from the sun. The season of life's change on earth, when water starts to turn into ice due to the lack of heat on earth, and when there is maximum ice on earth, the vaporization of water decreases on earth, due to which earth loses its growth of wet, breath and heat in it, and at last again the earth is attracted by the sun to regain its growth of breath, wet and heat in it gradually. Air. When ice starts to melt on earth, While coming closest to the sun, the earth gains the wet breath and heat in it, and after coming closest to the sun, earth completes the rotation of its breath, which maintains the breath of our lives as well as the breath of our civilization also on earth. So till the disfavor of the breaths of earth in our lives, our civilization is safe on earth. But the disfavor of the breaths of earth in our lives can be the causes to lose our civilization on earth, where the existence, resistance, and the deliverance of our lives are derived from the illusion, pollution, and the perception of our lives on earth, as only one-eyed person can enlighten the limelight of the civilization of blinds on earth. So God has disclosed the secrecy of divine mercy for the courtesy of divine perception of our civilization on earth. Sky. Darling, this is a lesson for our civilization that as God serves us from the crisis of the raw materials of our lives on earth, we should save us from the crisis of the virtues of our lives so that we can be chosen by God for being ridden divinely on earth, which releases ourselves from the journey of the ignorances of ages in the cages of our lives towards the dawn of immortality of divine dignity from the mortality of our lives on earth, and the favor of the diversity of this cycle of the sources of ration in our lives are the sources of the safety of our civilization on earth. And when the diversity of this cycle of the sources of ration will lose its favor from our lives gradually, we will lose our civilization also gradually from earth. Air. When the diversity of the vibrating atmospheric pressure will disqualify our civilization on earth, and our right ownership and the ownership of our lives will be in vain by the pain of the parting of our lives, as well as the parting of the civilization of our lives from as well as the parting of our civilization, as well as the parting of our civilization, parting of the civilization of our lives from earth. When God will ignore us, being no more with us as a kite without the right of God on earth, when there will be the games up on earth, because the ration, fashion, and salvation of our lives are complementary one another, but the matchlessness of these states are the causes of the fruitlessness in our lives on earth. Sky. When the illusion of our lives will collide with the pollution of our lives to sink in the will of the sea of our lives in place of the solution of our lives till the recharging of the earth to bear the fresh civilization of our lives on earth, as our lives are being recharged by the charges of various creatures during the courses of the births and deaths of our lives on earth, till we are being free from the rivers of our lives on earth, as the diversity of nature and the diversity of creatures are related one another on earth. So the difference of mentality, depth of mentality and the weight of mentality create a creature of its own activity. So one who sacrifices oneself for justice and one who sacrifices oneself for injustice, both are sacrifices having a difference of heaven and hell on earth, among which the diversity of God are derived from the diversity of human beings on earth. Air. When human beings enter in the examination of the lessons of virtues on earth, those who use themselves to qualify the virtues of their lives, they are promoted divinely in the sky, and those who misuse themselves in their lives, they are disqualified and misused as other creatures except human beings on earth. My friend, our lives have been given to us by our births and deaths till we are being released by the bless of God from our lives naturally, which creates a faith in our lives that the favor which we are getting in condition of the meeting with God, who can save us from the diversity of our lives on earth by making us free from the cage of the atmospheric pressure of earth for our births, where the enchanting role of divine bodies in the sky creates the cordiality of homogeneity for the maturity of our lives. For the maturity of our lives divinely, so that they can create a gateway of divine paradise for the surprise of our lives by elation for the divine mission of our lives on earth, so that God can give the birth of divine identity on earth, which creates the chance of reaching near God in the sky to the people on earth, the wonder of wonders, the divine wonder on earth, by the adventure of our lives, for the divine advantage in our lives, for our own paradise in the sky. When we get chance to perceive God closely, being out from the imagination of the awfulness and ignorances of ages in the cages of our lives, when God has colored the pages of our lives willingly by disclosing the secrecy of own activities, being near one and dear one of our lives, as a lesson for the selfish, senseless, and cruel as a lesson for the selfish, senseless, and cruel motion against the price of the mercy and courtesy for the crown of divine democracy in our lives on earth. That's why God has favored us for the disfavor of senselessness on earth. God has encouraged us for the discourages of ignorances on earth. When the earth will be helpless to feed us, the life will be hopeless to lead us, and there will be the indication of the situation of divine promotion by the divine owner on earth, who will help us to be free from the rivers of our lives on earth, as the divine light which has been lit by God before the end of the dignity of divine era on earth, leaving alone the rest of the civilization of our own. Air, my friends, as motion creates energy, energy creates emotion, which is the source of generation in our lives, and the suitableness of this emotion is the source of our progression according to the need of our generation, which varies from earth to the sky, so that it can create its link in the sky. The motion which is gifted by God, that motion can draw us to the nest of God in the breast of the sky as the solution of our lives, because the illusion and pollution of our lives are the causes of tension in our lives, which draws our attention from the devotion and dedication to God, which leads us to the abode of God from the episode of our lives in the set of earth, where we meet the need of our lives, which are being served time to time by God, nature and creatures to us, so that we can disclose the secrecies of God, nature and creatures for our lives according to the need of our lives on earth. Sky. So when we mature gradually with the maturity of earth, when God enriches his devotee by disclosing the secrecy of divine mercy in our lives, our dream of dreams, the divine dream comes true for the recognition of the salvation of our lives by the admission of the divine lesson, which enlighten the limelight of our civilization on earth, when we be free from the ignorances of ages, having a clear picture of existence, resistance and deliverance of our lives on earth, by giving a clear picture of the science of the mechanism and function of divine bodies for the melodies of our lives on earth, which assures those who are in hope of your closeness on earth. You break the divine protocol of grace for your mercy and courtesy to your devotee as the source of the beauty of being free from the rivers of our lives on earth. For a ray of hope you have given a scope by the birth of the divine owner on earth, as an opportunity to those who are the follower of divine faith on earth, who wants to be free from the reverse of their lives on earth, who wants to be known by the unknown role of divine bodies on earth, which are bound by the bindings of time during the round of the last stages on earth. Air. When God thinks its need on earth, God sacrifices the divine reign for the lesson of the selfish and senseless crime on earth. God hands over the divine charges to the divine owner on earth for the consideration and consolation of the devotees who are in charge of the honor of divine responsibilities on earth. What a great, wonderful price and prize of the surprise of God for the devotees and dedication of his devotees by the sacrifice of his reign. By the sacrifice of his reign, that the service which has been given by God up to now, that has been handed over to us on earth. We are the protector and server of your services on earth. You have given us the lesson of the judgment of divine management on earth. the divine management of which can be an example for the lesson of the mortality of earth, so that we can be immortal in our lives, being free from the moral weakness of our lives on earth by the great idea which has been served by God for the divine democracy of our lives on earth. Sky. When we get the responsibilities of divine charges for the recharging of our lives divinely, when we come in knowledge of God by coming in knowledge of the divine owner on earth as the indication of great alteration in the civilization of our lives on earth, because God is so serious to us accordingly that the empowerment of divine paradise to his devotee has created a divine surprise and suspense for the beginning of the dignity of divine era on earth, so that there can be the end of the divine image by the image of the new one, accordingly for the lesson of the civilization of our lives on earth. So you have given the birth of the divine owner on earth by the judgment of our divine management for the arrangement of our deliverance in lives, which is yours a surprise for the prize of our paradise in lives, as a consolation for the devotion of your devotees before the end of the game of our lives on earth. Because when the earth will lose its sources for us, what will be our position on earth? Will the cruelty of our selfishness and senselessness save us from the helpless selfishness and senselessness of earth? Here, my friend, life is not limited. Time is not limited. But the time of life is limited on earth, which can help us to reach at the prime of our lives, when there can be the period of the sanctification of earth for the rectification of our lives by the glorification of making free from the reverse of our lives on earth, when the penance of one's life gets the chance of being free from the cages of our earth and birth by the sympathy of God for the sympathy of our own to be known divinely on earth, which brings out from the scientific grip of our lives as well as from the binds and bounds of the rounds in the cage of the vibrating atmospheric pressure of our lives on earth. Sky. When we come in knowledge of the eternal life for the surprise of our divine paradise, which opens the divine door of immortality for the mortality of earth to those who knows the right of their lives, for which they fight all over their lives, for which they fight all over their lives in the battle of the possession of divine paradise on earth by an outstanding performance of love, faith and sacrifice of our lives, which create our link with divine paradise for the perception of our lives to enlighten the limelight of our civilization by the lesson of our salvation for a succession of immortality in the possession of the mortality of our lives on earth, in hope of the honor of the right of our divine liberty in lives, instead of the dishonor of the shroud of proud for the cowardice of our lives on earth, when the helpful earth will be helpless for us, when the helpful body will be helpless for us, when God will be out of reach to us to dishonor the pride of our lives by making helpless as earth and body of our lives. air. And in such way, as we lose our last breaths on earth, the earth will lose all its last breath also during the course of time, when there will not be the day and night on earth, when there will not be any change in the season of the atmosphere on earth, when the poles of the earth will lose its sharpness to move around itself, as we lose our sharpness to move around ourselves before losing the last breath of our lives. The earth will take only the round of the sun without moving around itself in its own place, when there will start an unlimited period of the ice stage, hot stage and rainy stage, etc. on earth, when the earth will be recharged by the charge of the sun for the recovery of its health, till there will be the beginning of the growth of our new civilization on earth, when the earth will start to move around itself in its own place to take the round of the sun in rotating position. Sky. Though we will lose ourselves and our civilization with the losing of the sources of earth for our lives, when we will be no more on earth. So now, as the audience of the picture of the earth and the sky, when we look the role of the divine owner on earth, we should try for our divine goal of God in the sky, because after the end of the role of the divine owner on earth, there will be the goal of our lives on earth, when the soul of our lives will lose the goal of own right after the human sources on earth, instead of the favor of the divine savor of God in the sky. Here, really, our lives are derived from the life of earth, and life of earth is derived from the life of the sky. That's why the courtesy of God creates mercy for the divine democracy of our lives on earth, when the judgment of divine management creates the arrangement of deliverance by the surprise of the prize of divine honor to a devotee, as the divine owner on earth, the owner of whom creates the manner of divine success for the access of the succession of the divine promotion of our lives to a dreamy destination in the sky. And this is the end of this play.